So just to set expectations, the purpose of this call is to get everyone on the same page regarding trunk-based development. I appreciate people on the call will already be familiar with this process, but it's good to just go over it to make sure we all have the same processes in place. This is largely a discussion about the differences between Git flow and trunk-based development and how that impacts things like pipelines and trying to reduce complexity when merges occur. And Alex has just joined the call as well. So I'm going to share my screen, and what I'll do is I'll start off by creating an empty repo and just go from the beginning there and gradually go through the branching process. Let's see if sharing screen is good. Sharing screen. Okay. Please let me know if the screen is showing or not.
Yep, it's showing up.
Cool. So what I'll do is I'll start off by creating a pretend repo, and we'll call it Trunky. There's no particular reason for that name. It's just a random name I've chosen. So we'll create a normal project, and we'll say we'll have a README for that project. And we'll just quickly say hello. Is the microphone okay, by the way? I'm using a different microphone. It's not too like crackly or awful.
Yeah, that's fine.
Microphone's okay? Excellent. Okay, so I'll add a remote. For this, I'll just add a local remote because I don't want to confuse this with like Git remotes and things that are in a different place. So I'll create a pretend remote for this. So this is where we're going to push to. So that will be our remote. So remote, and we'll initialize that as a repository. So this would be our origin, typically GitLab or GitHub, something like that. So if we do a fetch from the remote, there's nothing to fetch. But if we have a look at our log, we've obviously got something to push. So if I've done that correctly, we should be able to push to main. Great. So just to recap what we've got here, we've got a example repo. This could be a particular product. Let's say it's and this application, you can list jobs, create jobs, delete jobs, etc., etc. And we're currently on the main branch or the trunk branch. When I say trunk, when I say main, it's the same thing. And the key important information with trunk-based development is you always branch off of the main branch. And what you don't do is then create secondary branches off of new branches. You're always branching off of the trunk or the main branch. And that will always start with the creation of an issue. So let's say we've got a problem that needs to be fixed, a bug or a new feature. That would start with creating an issue. From that, you get an issue number, and that's the first branch. Let's make it real. So there's currently no web page for this application. So imagine that I've gone on to GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab. I've created an issue. Perhaps the product owner has created that issue, and or there's a Jira ticket or there's a Bitbucket ticket for that, and it's got ticket number 1. So we'll create a new branch for that. We'll call it branch 123 because that's in line with the documentation that we've written. And we need to add a basic web page. So there's a lot of information in there. There's the issue number and there's a little brief context about what it is. Importantly, we've branched off of the main branch so that branch currently is completely in sync with the main branch.
Mm-hmm.
So work happens on that branch. So we'll add a home page. We'll just do some very bad HTML. add that to our branch, and we'll reference it. We'll say this fixes the issue 123, and then we'll push that. So at the moment, we've got 2 branches, and obviously what we want to do is take that to production. What we do is we merge directly into the trunk branch, into the main branch. To take a little segue, in Git flow, often there's an intermediate step here where you might have a feature branch, and then we would merge this 123 branch into the feature branch, and then the feature branch would get merged into trunk. We want to avoid that entirely. We want to take individual small improvements and merge them directly into the trunk. I've skipped a step, so I'm a little bit jumping around here. Because we've now pushed that, so if we look at the history of what we've just done, we've done a git push. This is exactly when the pipeline tests, the PR previews, acceptance tests, usability, all of that testing can take place on this branch now. Because we've pushed it, the CI/CD pipelines respond to that event and they go, oh great, there's a new branch, and it will trigger off the pipelines, the PR preview, and the testing. If they all come back green with the tick, everything passes, and maybe there's some human testing as well, maybe the postman collections get run against that branch. If all of those things pass, then the pipeline is considered safe to merge into main. Now that might be a manual process, it might be an automated process, but the principle is that branch is up to date with main, it's got up to date with main, and it's got some new features in it. So the next step would be to merge that 123 branch into the trunk branch. So we'll do it. Now this merge that I'm doing now could be done manually, but in reality it probably wouldn't be done manually. It probably be done via a CI/CD process. Cool. Notice that we have a fast forward here. That's significant. The reason that the fast forward was able to happen like that was because the branch that we created, the 123 branch, was up to date with main, and the main branch was simply able to fast forward with those commits. And we do a git push forward in main, and now we've got the main branch up to date with that feature. I'm going to pause now and ask if there's any questions.
I have a quick question. So as per my understanding so far, what you just explained, so from the trunk or main branch, let's say we have an issue to fix it, like we have to fix an issue, right? Mm-hmm. So we are going to check out from that, we are going to create a branch from the trunk branch for that issue. We are going to fix the issue in that, and then we are going to merge it back to the main or trunk branch, right? That is the process for the issue you just mentioned. But what if we have a story or a feature? So are we going to follow the same process for feature as well? Because for feature, we are going to again, we are going to create a branch for the feature. We are going to develop in that, and then we are going to merge it back into the trunk branch. That's how you are envisioning this trunk-based development?
Yes. We always branch off of the main branch, and we always merge back into the main branch.
Mm-hmm. And what if there are, let's say, for example, I'm talking about some interdependencies. We may have dependencies. I'm working on a particular story 1. Let's say, I'm just giving you an example. There's another developer who's working on story 2, and there are interdependencies on some of the tasks which we are going to perform on both of the branches, right? Mm-hmm. So in that particular case, what is your recommendation? How should we branch that out?
Yeah, so let's do the scenario where multiple teams are collaborating. So I'm going to try and create that scenario here. So on the left-hand side is person 1, on the right-hand side is person 2. And they might be on the same team collaborating on an issue. So first, let's create the issue. So imagine, again, you go on, you create the issue in Jira or Bitbucket or GitLab. And marketing came back and they said, actually, the page isn't very good because there's no description. And I want to tackle the scenario when multiple people are working on the same thing. So as normal, we'll create a new branch. And this will be issue 1, 2, 3, 4 because it goes up. And we'll say add description. And just to simulate being another person, I'm going to go into a different branch and I'll call it person 2. Because the complication that this can create is, how do I deal with the scenario where work has gone on a different branch or even on the same branch, but we're at different states and we want to keep everything in sync because 2 people are working on the same issue, for example. So on the left-hand side is one person's machine, on the right-hand side is someone else's laptop. So I'll just do a git clone shape. I wonder if I can rename this. No, I don't know how to do that. Maybe I can do it. No, I won't faff around with that. Okay. So fetch with no branch. And on the left hand side, we've got person 1, on the right hand side, we've got person 2. So I created a new branch. If I do a git push origin 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's now made that new issue branch available to the whole team. Notice that I've not actually coded anything yet, but there's still value in pushing that because the branch is available. So when person 2 logs on and they've been assigned the same issue because they're collaborating, when they do a git fetch, or if they're using VS Code, it does a git fetch in the background, that branch becomes available. So 2 people can work on the same branch. It's still branched off of the main branch. And let's create a conflict. So I'll start adding the paragraph. This is very simplified. And without communicating with each other, this person will create the same thing. It's slightly different, miscommunication. I'm purposely creating a miscommunication here because 2 people are on the same branch working on the same issue. And it's a chicken and egg now, it's a race condition, right? The 2 people are essentially working on the same issue. We're referencing that. Description. I'm going to push that up. 2, 3, 4. Where are we pushing to? Origin 1, 2, 3, 4. And the same issue is going to be pushed to, but from a different person. I appreciate I'm not directly answering your question right now about interdependence, but I'm sort of getting to that point if you'll bear with me. So similarly, we've got things there, and we'll do a git commit message 1, 2, 3, 4 added description. I'm going to do a git push as well. Cool. So the first sort of error that the developer sees is, why is my push being rejected? So we've got this interdependent relationship now with 2 people working on the same issue, and we're using trunk-based development. And this is something that you have to get used to doing, and that's always pulling to make sure you've got the most up-to-date code, both from the trunk branch, because you want to be branching off the main branch. If you imagine the tree, which is constantly growing with new code, when you create a new branch, you want to make sure that that new branch, when it branches off, is up to date with the latest code. And to do that, you need to make sure you're on the main branch, make sure you're doing a fetch, And the tools that you use, like VS Code in the background, can do this for you automatically as well. And make sure you're always doing a git pull from origin main. And what that does is it will constantly make sure that that main branch or that trunk branch is constantly up to date, so that when you do create a new branch, let's say the new issue, that new branch is up to date with main. So let's resolve that conflict. I'm going to check out onto the branch that was refused to be pushed. And we'll just try and do the push again. That was the wrong branch. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's getting rejected. So first we have to pull that down. I'm going to be purposely explicit about what I'm wanting to pull. I'm wanting to pull that branch. I need to decide what merge strategy to use. So I'll use the default. Cool. We'll do a git pull from origin. And oh no, we've got a merge conflict. Now the reason that this is really, really important with trunk-based development is you want to be pulling often, and the same way you want to be pushing often as well, because it's too expensive to code for a long time on an isolated branch and not share that with the team. It's really important to feel comfortable with pushing early, even unfinished code, especially if you're collaborating with a team, because then they get to see the code as well. Maybe they've got an insight on how to fix something in a different way, or maybe there's a misunderstanding about what the issue is, and maybe the issue is not even needed anymore. The sooner that you can push, the better, because what you're trying to keep is up to date with the trunk branch, because the more out of date you are with trunk, the more painful it is to then merge eventually, because there's too much change that's happened. So perhaps the most disruptive example of that would be a database schema change. If you're coding a form or some kind of API post request that expects a particular shape of the data, you want to make sure that you've got the most up-to-date schema of that API that you're posting to. And if you've been coding on a branch for like 2 or 3 days or longer, you want to make sure that you know about changes to that schema early rather than later to avoid wasted work. So let's fix that conflict. And conflicts can be scary, and they're often more scary if there's been lots of commits since your last push. So again, it comes back to pulling little often and pushing little and often, because then merge conflicts like this become trivial. It's only hard once there's been so many changes, because then there's different people that might have pushed that branch and you genuinely don't really know what the merge conflict, how to resolve that merge conflict. So I'm doing a quick review, and I'm going to decide, maybe I'll send a DM to someone, hey, which one should we go for? And then we can resolve that conflict. So once I've resolved that conflict, I'll do and hit connect. And because I've now resolved that conflict, and I'm sort of ahead of that branch, I can now push that branch. They were up to date with person 1 on the left and person 2 on the right. Let's do a git patch. We want to make sure that our branch on the right is up to date. So I'm being the persona of the person on the right here. And notice that I didn't get a conflict on the right because there's a new commit on that branch, and these two people are now up to date and in sync. Any questions so far?
Not from my side. Inzamam also joined. Inzamam, I know you didn't heard the earlier part. We have the recording, so you can listen the recording and can come up with any of your questions, and we can get the answers. But any questions so far from anyone else? I think Sachin has a question. Sachin?
Yeah, hello everyone. Chris, I'm not from the tech background, and I just see that lot many tech people are not here in the call, but which is okay. But then, do you have any cheat sheet or a thumb rule document which you can follow and I can distribute with amongst the team? So that is like one of the things you said that always take a branch from the main. So that's very basic, and you may seem that I'm a novice. You can get a gauge that I'm a novice person. So if you can share that cheat sheet, then that will be great for us, I suppose.
Yes. There's a document called Rollback and Git branching strategy. I'll make sure that we send that out as well. Khalid, shall I send that to yourself so that you can distribute it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, please do send that out to me as well. And I'm going to share this recording with the dev team. Inzamam is here as well, but I think Inzamam. Do you have any questions, Vam? Anything? It's basically primarily discussing about we have trunk-based development, how we could be doing like all the branches should be created from the trunk always, and what is the like how we should merge it, how frequent we should merge it back to the trunk, and those discussions have happened. In addition to that, we also discussed if somebody is working on the same piece of same area of code, two people are working on it on a different branches, how that merge thing should happen, and we should still be merging it back to trunk, and somebody has to resolve the merging issues, right?
Yes, great. Okay, let's focus more on the scenario then, where multiple people are focusing on different issues, and where do they merge that? How do they merge that? And how do they keep in sync? Is that a good place to focus now?
Yeah, sure. By the way, I have a 3 minutes a hard stop. I have to drop. Inzamam, you can if you can continue for a few, but just to let you know, because it was a 30 minutes meeting, I have to drop.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, someone keep me on time. I lost track of time now. Yeah, I'll keep the call. I'll probably go on for another 5-10 minutes. Please don't feel you have to stay on. If you've got another thing to drop to, no problem.
All right, sounds good. Yeah.
I'll tidy up this issue here to go through the same process. So what have we got? Just to reiterate, we've got a new issue 1, 2, 3, 4 where we've added the description, and just like we did at the beginning, we're going to move this into main. But hang on a sec, what's happened in between those? So we've got a git push which happened. If you imagine, if we go onto GitLab pipelines, before we merge in, we're going to see all of the checks pass, all the end-to-end tests pass. Maybe there's some UAT, maybe the postman collections run against that as well. If all of that is green, it's QA'd, either an automated or a manual process, ideally an automated one, would then merge that into the main branch, also known as the trunk branch. So let's do that now. Sorry, just to reiterate again, I'm making sure that this branch is up to date with main plus the new code that we've added, which is the description we've added. So before I do that, I'm going to do a git fetch origin main. Great. The fact I've got no response means that there's no updates from other teams, because of course in the background there might have been other changes that have already been merged into main, other issues that I'm not aware of. By doing a git fetch, I become aware of those, and again I can do a git pull origin main. And if there had been other updates that had been released whilst I was working on my issue, I incorporated those updates from the trunk branch into my issue branch. If I get a conflict here, if I get an error, or even if I get no errors, but I just get the new code from trunk, let's say a different feature has been merged, we've now pulled that new feature into our issue branch. We do a git push, because there's new code now in that. We need to make sure that that new code that was merged into trunk has still passes tests that we have. So we're going to do a git pull and validate that the pipeline still passes and that our issue branch is up to date. We're going to say that it is up to date because we can see that it's already up to date, and we'd look at the pipelines to make sure it's green, and now we're good to merge that into main just like we did at the beginning of this call. So now I'll do a git merge origin merge Before I do that, I'm going to do a git diff just to show that the only difference between the main branch and the 1, 2, 3, 4 branch is the addition of that code for that issue. This is a really good litmus test for when you're reviewing a PR. When you're reviewing a PR in trunk-based development, when you look at the diff, you should only see the changes that are relevant to solving that particular issue. What you should not see is changes related to that issue, plus lots of other branches that are unrelated to that issue. That's usually a sign that either the branch isn't up to date with main and therefore needs to be brought up to date with the process we described earlier: git fetch, origin main, git pull, origin main. Or there's been other code that's been merged in mistakenly that needs to be taken out that's not relevant to that issue, because a pull request needs to be specific for a particular issue, solving a particular issue. Cool. So let's merge that in. And then we'll push that up. There we go. So main is up to date. We've got that issue merged in. We know that all of the tests pass because we saw that on the CI/CD pipelines. And that branch now, that trunk branch, is what we call a deployable state. We could deploy that to production now. Insman, do you have a question?
Yes. Sorry for interruption. So I just want to confirm about git merge and git rebase. When do we need to use one, and why we need to use them or prioritize the other on the other one? Other than that, we have used git fetch above. So what information or what we achieve with that? So, basically what I use, like whenever I have to update the local branch, like whenever I create a branch from dev and I have to check out, I have to use git fetch in order to update the origin or the local branch from the remote branch. So what other information or what other things we can achieve with git fetch? Just want to understand that. And the other one is git merge and git rebase.
Okay, so I'll answer those in reverse. So if it's okay with yourself, I'll rephrase that to what is the difference between git fetch and git pull, and what do I get from that? So a git fetch essentially gets the changes that are available. It populates your when you do a git fetch, it puts more data inside the .git folder. So it doesn't apply those changes though. So in terms of your checked out state, your current head, those changes don't get applied. The difference between a git fetch and a git pull is when you do a git pull, it does a git fetch for you, and then it applies those changes that are found in here to your current branch that you're checked out onto. So it's a nice intermediary step to say, okay, well, I want to see if there's been any changes, and then I would like to apply them. So git fetch, it downloads the objects and references from another repository. So it gets the information about changes that have happened, versus when you do a git pull, it does a git fetch. It does a git fetch, and then it applies those changes. So the word integrate there means to take those new changes and actually apply them to the files on your disk to change them. The difference between git merge and git rebase versus squash merge and rebase, a lot of them are just organizational, what works best for you. A git rebase results in a nice chronological change log, whereas a squash merge creates new commits. So when you do a git rebase, it takes the individual commits that you've done on your branch. So let's say in order to fix this 1, 2, 3, 4 issue, I locally did 25 commits. When you do a rebase, and you do a git log afterwards, you will see 25 commits that get reapplied in the same order to that main branch. So you get a nice chronological audit trail of every commit that happened in that order, which is quite nice for some people to see. The benefits of that are if within those 25 commits, one of them was wrong, it's actually very easy to revert that, because you can take that individual, say commit 16 was particularly bad, you can say git revert that commit. The opposite to that is when you do like a squash merge or a merge commit. And what that would do is it would take those, did I say 25 or 26? It would take those 25 commits, squash them together, and create a new commit on the main branch. So when you did a git log, you would not see those individual commits in the log. You just see an accumulation, a combined commit of all those 25 commits. And there's trade-offs for that. You get a much more summarized view, but you might say, oh, actually, it's harder to revert. I've now lost the ability to individually revert. A lot of this comes down to preference, and I'm hesitant to say either way. The main focus of this talk, though, is around trunk-based development, and it doesn't really factor into trunk-based development whether you prefer either of those options. But that's the main difference. It's the history and your ability to be very fine-grained in how you revert if you wanted to in the future. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. Conscious of time, so what was the other scenario that we wanted to go over? It was, could someone tell me a particularly gnarly issue that you'd like me to go over? That would be really helpful. Whilst that's happening, I'll put my charger in. I think I'm missing someone's question. Did I forget someone's question or a scenario to go over? I think it was a scenario where there's multiple issues to be worked on, right?
Yeah.
So we'll do that now. So let's say we've got two issues being worked on at the same time. What I'm doing is I'm doing a git fetch. Why am I doing that? Because I want to keep making sure that my main branch is up to date, because that's the trunk branch. Great. Let's create a new issue. And this issue is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we want to add a form. And in a different team on the same project, there's a different issue. So I'm person 2 on the right. Notice that habit, I keep going back to the trunk branch. And person 2, again, person 2's noticed that there's been some changes. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that my trunk branch is up to date. Cool, so I'm up to date. Now I'm going to create my branch, and this is something slightly different. I'm going to add a footer, and this is issue, the next one up. Struggling to count here, 4, 6. They're going to add a footer. Ideally, they need to be independent. So interdependent, let's say something like add sign up form. They're both form related in some way. That's more likely to conflict because they involve database schemas. So right now, these two issues can work independently, and they should. So when we're thinking about user stories, they need to be broken down so that they can be worked on in an independent fashion. So on the left, developer 1, I'm going to do that. I'm going to add the contact form. And it's not ready to go to production yet. So on the right, that work can continue as well. On the left, this work continue as well. It only starts to matter when the code from any of those issue branches gets merged into production. was this? Add contract form. So I just quickly okay. So we've got a contract form. Okay. It's a bit of a race, if you like, because we've separated them out. If item on the left gets production first, if all the tests pass, that's fine. And equally, if item on the right passes, that's fine too. Maybe there's a database schema change. So at the moment, we're storing name here. And the classic example of that is in the database schema. We've got one field for name, but then on the right-hand side, we decide to store it in a different way. So first name and last name, for example. That would create a really quite gnarly example. So I'm just going to try and save some time here. So the issue that we're running into right now is a scenario where the database schema has first name and last name, but on the other schema it just has name. So I'm copying and pasting from these windows, not because the developers would have to, but just to save time for the video. Cool. So let's say the first name, and we've also got last name. I've not put any labels on that form, but last name. So this is a clear difference. Item 1 needs to pass, needs to go to production, or item 2 needs to pass and go to production. To borrow from Toyota with the stop production line analogy, if item on the left goes to production first, and say we've got a table that stores name, it's the item on the right's responsibility to observe that the trunk has changed and the state of the world is different. Therefore, we need to change this form. More likely is item on the left would happen first, and then some database refactoring would happen, and a decision would have to be made. So, okay, how do we cater for both of those eventualities? So there would be an intermediary PR which handles both scenarios, where you store the name on its own and also present the name in two separate pieces, so first name and last name, and then do a final fix-up merge in the final fix-up issue, where you drop the name column from the database. And there's a really good video on YouTube about this exact example as well, which I can follow up with. But the big takeaway from this is, I'm trying not to go too off track with the database example, but they are the most gnarly ones, so it's worth talking about. The big takeaway is to break that into, instead of 2 steps, 3 steps, where you have an intermediary step in the middle where you're serving both database schemas, the old one and the new one, and then another final step where you drop the old way of doing it and continue with the new schema. Any questions so far? Did you have a question there? That I saw your mic flicker.
No, I was just about to say no right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's finish this one off. So git add index, and we'll do git commit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Added contact form. So I'm doing my commit, pushing it up, and typing the name wrong, I think. There we go. Cool. So we've got that new branch pushed up. Because the new branch is pushed up, CI/CD tests run, maybe some QA, etc., etc. Everything passes. We're all good. So, and then probably automatic or manual through the pipelines, because all of those tests are green on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 branch, that would then get merged into the trunk branch, which is in a deployable state for production. So those last two, There we go. So the last two commands I did, which were merge. So this merge would happen wouldn't happen in your local machine, that would happen in production. So that would be the button on GitLab where you say on the PR, yes, this is all good. I'm going to merge this with main now. And the CI/CD process would do essentially a fast forward, a merge of that issue into main. I'm just doing it here so we don't jump around inside GitLab or Bitbucket, etc. Okay. Back to the conflicting scenario situation. Now we're in a scenario where this sign-up form is still in progress and it's not pushed yet. But the reality is there's been a release. The release that's happened is this contract form is released. This is where it gets interesting with trunk-based development and perhaps a change in behavior, because we have to incorporate the changes that have happened upstream into our code. So we have to do a git fetch fast. And okay, we can see main is up to date, and that's an indication to us that our issue branch is out of date, and we have to bring it up to date with the trunk branch. How do we do that? Git pull origin main. Remember, main is the trunk branch. And we've got a conflict. Oh, sorry. So can I finish my little bit of work here? Well, I think I was adding the contact form. Yeah, so let's add that. Let's sign up form. 1, 2, 3, 4. Added form. We can push it, but the difference is, the problem with this is it's out of date with trunk. One sec, I need to get that branch name. There we go. So if we look at the output here again, we've seen that the issue branch that we're working on is out of date with trunk. What we have to make sure is that our issue branch is up to date with trunk. So we're going to pull origin main. I need to set this default merge strategy as well. You wouldn't have to do that if you're using VS Code. We're going to do a pull. And again, we've got a conflict. So this brings us back, circling back round to always keeping up to date with the trunk as quickly as you can, because you want to make sure that you're not getting too much pain by staying too far behind. And there we go, we can see that there's that exact conflict. Do we want to store first name and last name, or do we want to store main, just main on its own? So behind this will also be the database schema. So communication needs to take place, collaboration needs to take place. What is the correct schema? Because you know that the branch you've just pulled from is main, you know that that's production, and production is the source of truth. So you go, okay, well, head is first name, last name. Therefore, I need to stay up to date and go, oh, well, okay, I didn't realize we were storing name and first name. I need to keep my code up to date with production. And that's the change. It's always pulling from main, making sure your issue branch is up to date so that you can incorporate changes that have happened external to you into your issue branches. I'm going to resolve that conflict, add it, do a git commit. There we go. And now we can do our push again. And we've responded to a change upstream. Push origin. There we go. So that was an example of what do I do when a different team is working on a different issue, which is kind of going to impact on my own work. How do I deal with that situation where there's been a change that's impacted like an API call that I made, maybe there's been a database schema change, the answer to that is you have to pull in that change because it's gone to production by now, or at least it's in the trunk branch, which is deployable. That's the source of truth. Therefore, this issue that's not yet released, this one on the right, this other person to the team, the responsibility of that team is to be up to date with trunk and incorporate those changes. And to make that easier is to get into that habit of pulling from trunk. So the issue branch needs to stay up to date. And the way to check that is to get diff between the trunk branch and the branch that you're working on. And making sure that you always do git pull origin main the rook state. All right, I'm gonna probably bring this to a close unless there's questions open. So I've gone well over half an hour, and I don't want to eat into everyone's late evening because I appreciate you're in a different time zone, and sleep is really important. Does anyone have any questions about the process?
I am good. Just I want to repeat my request about the cheat sheet.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me, much appreciated. I'll send out the cheat sheet.
I have a question, but this is regarding what we have faced, and we are unable to make a decision like what to do or what to not. Mm-hmm. So we try to push code into stage instance, and definitely I had some conflicts that I didn't have some of the code which is on stage in my branch. So because we have a stage branch, and then we have taken two branches. One of them is for SSI team, my team, and one of the branches for CCI team. So we have faced that issue. Might be possible some like from CCI branch, some of the code get merged into stage. I don't know what was the scenario, but the decision we want to make that how to resolve that conflict. So what was my understanding at that time is to pull from the stage branch, as we are doing in this session as well. But otherwise, we did the cherry picking. So I just want to confirm, as we are in this meeting as well, so might be possible some of the other team members from different teams will see this video and they might have that scenario in their mind as well. So what to do in this type of scenarios? Is it okay, or is it reliable, safe to just pull it from the main branch like we are doing in this scenario? And the criteria is a bit different, as we have two branches which get merged into stage branch used by the other two teams.
Thank you. That's a really good question, Isman. So, yeah, the takeaway from there is the danger or the pattern that you probably should move away from is having that intermediary. I think you said stage branch and maybe dev and stage, and probably ultimately a production branch as well. I suspect what's happening there is development is branching off of the stage branch or off of the dev branch, when instead what should be happening is development should be branching off of the production branch or the trunk branch or the main branch. The problems start to emerge when development branches off of a developer branches off of the dev branch or a lower branch, and that leads to things like what you said, like cherry picking individual commits and trying to work out which commit can we cherry pick onto this particular branch, and then have a secondary merge into main. And you can tell just by trying to explain that process, it's very error prone, very hard to orchestrate, very hard to automate as well. So yeah, my recommendation there is to move away from having those intermediary branches, and definitely try to not do cherry picking in that scenario, because that isn't particularly conducive to automating pipelines. And practically the thing to do is to merge directly off of the trunk branch, off of the main branch, and merge directly back into the main branch. The intermediary step is with the push of that issue branch, all of the end-to-end tests, the CI/CD tests run against it to tell you the feedback of is this safe to merge into the main branch. Does that address your question?
Yes, sort of. I might be send you some explanatory email as well, just to get you the scenario. If we in the future, which we definitely, because we are still developing the website, so we might get into that issue again, and definitely you will be part of that thread in that case, and we might get to a decision in the future that we might not get stuck merging our branch, and like we have implemented CI/CD for smooth deployment and integration, so we might move that, make that more smoother than we are doing right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes, please do. I look forward to receiving that. Thanks for your time, everyone. I'm going to drop off now. We can have a review after as well if you like. Thanks for your time. I'll send out that cheat sheet and I hope you'll make sure that gets circulated around as well. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good day.
Cheers, thank you. Bye-bye.